Good morning, ladies. We are studying a very friendly subject and chapter, one that all of you know about. And Elizabeth George covered so well in her chapter, you wonder if there's anything else to be said. But we want to look at some things about kindness today. The fruit of the Spirit is gentleness, meaning kindness. And we're going to talk about that today. Ephesians 4:32 is our perfect verse. And be ye kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake hath forgiven you. The last Sunday in December, my husband and I were visiting Bob and Rochelle and their family for the first of the year. And we went to their church. And I met a middle-aged couple, very nice couple, named Vicki and Phil. And they told me their story. I want to make it clear, it was not coming for Bob. I don't think with Privacy Acts that would have worked, but it came straight from the couple. They told me that they had been victims of terrible fraud, that everything they had been wiped out. Their bank accounts, all of them, were empty. So they went to the bank and they said they met a very nice young personal banker who helped them through it. And it took a long, long time to get through it. But they said that while they were there, this young banker told them he was pastor of a church plant, a small church plant there in Leland, and he invited them to church. So they didn't come immediately, but they came a little bit later, and this is what they observed. And I think this is just the heart of kindness, because we need to observe. Sometimes we're so self-absorbed, or our own families and our problems, and that we just don't notice as much as we should. They noticed that this was a two-car family who came to church every morning, separated, because they had so many things they had to bring from home to set up for the church. They had the PA system, they had the screen, they had all of the hymn books, they had all of the things for the table because they have a snack beforehand, and just carloads full, 2 carloads full. They also have signs they put out on the road, and then a big banner they put in front of this government building where they meet. And so this couple, after just coming that time or two, said this shouldn't be. This couple needs to ride in one car and ride together as a family. You mean to tell me that for 5 years they have had 2 cars every Sunday to come? And when we visited there, sometimes there were 3 cars that also took the stuff. And they decided not only to observe that, but to do something about it. So they went to Bob and told him that they were going to get a storage unit somewhere near the church, and they were going to take it upon themselves every Sunday morning to get a friend to bring his car, because it takes 2 cars, and they were going to bring the things over to the church and help set them up. Now, that was an answer to prayer, because Bob and Rochelle have been in that church for 5 years, and although people have done kind things, there's been nobody who's really come alongside them to say, we're really going to help you, we want to do this, you need this done. And they said to me it was because of Bob's kindness to them in the bank and his patience and working so long, tedious hours through this with them till they got it all settled, that they saw something in him that they wanted to know more about that little church. And so you don't return kindness for kindness, because you don't have to do that. If it's real kindness, it doesn't have to be repaid. But they saw a need, they decided to do it. They also have a woman from Alaska who has moved to North Carolina. She's alone, and she'll get a mop. And after the service, she's mopping that floor because they have so many things they have to do to clean. And that's her job. And she said to me, look at Phil, who is this husband who is taking the things over from the storage unit. She said, I was gone 1 week for Christmas, and he took over my job. She said, now, Phil, that's my job. I'm going to do the mopping. But she's just such a sweet, kind lady, and she just helps out in any way she can. And they were all excited because they were going to have a 2020 meeting for anybody in the church who wanted to come to set forth some goals for the new year. And so they all came, and I'm sure that Deb came too, the lady who likes to mop the floors and clean and do things like that. So we have kindness all around us. I gave you all a sheet that has how God has been kind to you. I thought, sometimes we need to remind ourselves. We know it, but if you put it down in writing, sometimes it helps. And then, how have others been kind to you? And then the third one is, how can you be kind to others? And sometimes we need to plan it. We need to think about it. We need to observe. We're going to look at the meaning of kindness at first. And I've given you a few definitions, some of them Elizabeth George's, and some of them from other places. But I just want to tell you that every time you have a definition in the dictionary, they give you synonyms. And I can look around at you ladies, and I can see many of you, I could just say your name, and that is a synonym of kindness. Because you are always thinking of other people, and you're always doing something for someone to encourage them, to help them. And so we will keep that in mind too, that there are many, many, many of you, most of you. I don't know all of you really well, but the ones I know are very kind ladies. I liked this definition. Kindness is the impression of God upon Spirit-filled Christians. Now we're studying the fruit of the Spirit, so we know we have to be Spirit-filled in order to be able to do these different things we've talked about. We've talked about love, joy, and peace. Talked about Jesus' attitude when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. And then this starts us in a new series of 3, fruit. And kindness, of course, it was supposed to be the other way around. Patience was going to be first. I threw a monkey wrench in that. But so kindness is the second one of that second group of 3. Spirit-filled Christians will be moved by a spirit of kindness toward other people. You're always thinking of the other lady, the other child, the other man, someone you know. A Spirit-filled Christian will live relationships with others that are long-tempered. Do you know anybody who's short-tempered? I think we all know short-tempered people. I mean, they are volatile. They are just waiting to blow up. But a Spirit-filled Christian will live relationship with others that are long-tempered, and they are filled with kindness. Colossians 3:12-14. Put on, therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long-suffering, forbearing one another, and forgiving one another, if any man have a quarrel against any. Even as Christ forgave you, so also do ye. And above all these things, put on charity, which is the bond of perfectness. Now let me tell you, there are times when you say, okay, I've had it. I'm not going to have anything else to do with that person. I have been mistreated by that person so many times. We are not to do that. Scripture tells us that is wrong. We are to always forgive, and think how many times we have sinned against God on a daily basis. We get wrong thoughts, or we say something wrong to somebody, and God is always gracious and forgiving. And then Elizabeth George had 3 that I specifically liked. Kindness has been defined as tenderness and concern for other people. You look at a mother or grandmother or great-grandmother, someone with a little child, baby or little child, and the tenderness they have toward that one. Kindness is also a sweetness of disposition and concern for other people. And kindness, like all the other fruit of the Spirit, desires godly action and therefore plans for those actions. And I think sometimes we have actions on the spur of the moment that are kind, but we don't always plan to do something. Now, this could take 3 weeks or 4 nonstop to discuss how Jesus exemplified kindness. He set the perfect example and showed love and compassion, but I have mentioned some in here that we might not stop to think about. Have you ever heard a parent rebuke a child in a very terrible way in a grocery store or in a restaurant? I was in the grocery store and I heard this man just yelling at the top of his lungs, and I thought, oh my goodness, what's happening? And I looked at the end and he had his 2 little girls and he was just yelling at them and grabbing. So I did what I usually do, and you hear about road rage and how people are hit with their car or hit. I'm going to be hit sometime, I'm going to tell you. I just stood right there and I looked at him until he looked up and he saw me looking at him. Because I think sometimes people forget there are other people around. They get angry. I don't know what the little girls were doing. I have no idea. It was probably something very naughty. But I don't think they had to be yelled at really loudly by their father. So then a little bit later I passed them and the little girls are just doing like little girls do. So it didn't bother them very much for very long. Not as long as it bothered me. But we need to learn to rebuke people kindly. And Jesus is the perfect example with 2 different women in the Bible, with many, many people, but I have chosen 2 women. One was the Samaritan woman at the well. Now we need to review, a Samaritan was half Jew and half Gentile, and they had nothing to do with the Jews. And so her question first when he asked for water was, why do you ask me for water, you being a Jew and I am a Samaritan? So then in John 4 we see Jesus answered and said unto her, whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water, springing up in everlasting life. The woman said unto him, Sir, give me this water, that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. Jesus saith unto her, Go, call thy husband, and come hither. Now Jesus knew, he knew he was just going to handle it gently. Go, call thy husband, and come hither. The woman answered and said, I have no husband. And Jesus said unto her, not, I know that you're awful, you're living in sin. No, Jesus said, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband. In that thou saidst truly. The woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. And then she went on talking about Messiah would come and so forth. And she said, And I know he will tell us all things. And Jesus saith unto her, I that speak unto thee am he. What kind words did he say through that whole interaction with that woman? And he did it again. A woman was taken in adultery and set in the midst of everyone with Jesus, and these men said, Master, this woman was taken in adultery in the very act. Now Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. But what sayest thou? This they said, tempting him, that they might have to accuse him. But Jesus stooped down and with his finger just started writing on the ground as though he hadn't even heard them. So when they continued asking him, he lifted up himself and said unto them, He that is without sin among you, let him cast a stone at her. And again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. And they which heard it, being convicted by their own conscience, went out one by one, beginning at the eldest, even unto the last. And Jesus was left alone, and the woman standing in the midst. When Jesus had lifted up himself and saw none but the woman, he said unto her, Woman, where are thine accusers? Hath no man condemned thee? She said, No man, Lord. And Jesus said unto her, Neither do I condemn thee. Go and sin no more. Now, he didn't approve of the sinning, but he was kind in the way he forgave her and told her to sin no more. We know that Jesus healed hundreds and hundreds of people from different illnesses. Some he didn't even intend to, but like the woman with the issue of the blood who just thought, if I can touch the hem of his garment, and then of course he knew right away that she had been healed. But there were 4 friends, and they were really wonderful friends because they took their friend who had been sick of the palsy for a long time, and they took him to Jesus to be healed. But there were too many people. They were coming out of the room where everybody was, so they got the idea, let's go up on the roof, and we'll cut the tile, and we'll let him down through the roof. Jesus was kind. He could have said, wait your turn. We're full in here. Or, what are you doing? You're compromising the roof. You know, there are a lot of things. And I'm not trying to belittle Christ. I'm just trying to show you he didn't think of any of those things. He was moved by the faith of the man on the bed and the 4 men who brought him. And when Jesus saw their faith, he said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. But of course the scribes didn't like that, and they were reasoning that that was blasphemy and so forth. And immediately, when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they so reasoned within themselves, he said unto them, Why reason ye these things in your hearts? Whether is it easier to say to the sick of the palsy, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Arise, and take up thy bed and walk? But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins, he saith unto the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, Arise, and take up thy bed, and go thy way into thine house. And immediately he arose, took up the bed, and went forth before them all. And I can just see that. Here's a man who has been bedridden for a long, long time, and he suddenly rolls up that bed, puts it under his arm, and walks out to go home to surprise his family with what God has done for them. They were all amazed, and they glorified God, saying, We never saw it in this fashion. Now, Jesus helped many lepers, but in your book, Elizabeth George talks a lot about we need to touch people. Now, some people don't like to be touched, so you have to be careful. But you show them love and compassion. All right. Jesus healed the leper in Mark 2:40-42. There came a leper to him, beseeching him, and kneeling down to him, and saying unto him, Oh, if thou wilt, canst thou make me clean? And Jesus, moved with compassion, put forth his hand and touched him, and saith unto him, I will, be thou clean. Now he touched him. People didn't touch lepers. Jesus touched him. And as soon as he had spoken, immediately the leprosy departed from him, and he was cleansed. Have you ever had people at your house, either for a meal or they were staying with you and you were sick? I know some have, because I was told that missionaries were staying in this home for a week or 2, and the woman was sick the entire time. You know how you feel, because you know you need to be up, and you need to be doing things, and you need to be preparing things, and yet you don't feel like it, and you really don't know whether you should or not. Well, this happened with Simon's wife's mother, who had a fever. And after Jesus had spoken in the synagogue, they left and went to his house. But Simon's wife's mother lay sick of a fever, and anon they tell him of her. Now, they didn't ask him to heal her or anything else. They just told him, well, you know, she's got a fever. And he came and took her by the hand, there's the touch again, and lifted her up. And immediately the fever left her, and she ministered unto them. So that was wonderful that they got to have a meal, I guess, or refreshment, something, because she ministered unto them. Now, there are hundreds of examples throughout Jesus' lifetime where he helped the sick, those who were crippled, those who were blind, those who were demon-possessed, those who were hungry, he fed them, and also the children who wanted to come see him, and the disciples were trying to get the children away from him. He always, in every single situation, showed love and compassion toward them, setting the perfect example for us. Now, how do others exemplify kindness? I mean, we know Jesus is the perfect example, and we could go on and just give all of those, but I tried to make some things that were practical that we might think about. I like Winston Churchill's quote, "We make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give." And we need to be giving to people and helping them. There's intentional kindness. Now, usually when a king became a king, all the members of the family were gotten rid of. Just that's the way it was done. But listen in verse 3 of 2 Samuel 9, when David said, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness?" God's kindness, he says. And he found out about Mephibosheth. And he had them bring Mephibosheth to him. He gave Mephibosheth all that he should have for an inheritance, and then invited him to sit at their table and treated him as if he were his very own son. Showed kindness. A more modern example, and we can have many of these, but this young woman was flying with a 3-year-old who was misbehaving and a 4-month-old who was hungry. And it wasn't a pretty picture. And so she was trying her best to calm them down, and this man who was seated near them saw what was happening, and he remembered what it had been like when he was young and had young children. So he said to her, "Could I hold your baby while you get your little girl taken care of?" And so he held the baby. She got the little girl buckled in, got her calmed down, and then he gave her the little boy, and she was able to feed the little boy, and then he colored in a coloring book with the little girl and kept her happy. So the plane landed. I mean, everything went well from then on. The plane landed, and he came up and said to the woman, "I'm on the next flight with you too, so if you need any help, you be sure you ask me." And this is what she said. Jessica said, "You know, anybody could have sat by me. But God's providence put that nice man, one of the nicest men I have ever met, on the plane next to me, who helped me with my children." 1 Peter 3:8 says, "Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. Love as brothers. Be tender-hearted. Be courteous." There was a woman named Rhonda. Her health wasn't very good. Her husband had just lost his job, and their little 3-year-old boy was autistic and nonverbal and had just been diagnosed with stage 4 neuroblastoma, which is a cancer tumor. And now that's a rather overwhelming situation. I mean, we can all put ourselves in her place, but many of us have had things similar to that that just seem overwhelming. And she went to the mailbox, and there was an anonymous letter to her from a neighbor, fussing at her because of the disrepair of their lawn and how awful it looked. So she posted it, not to be mean, but just to show people that there are reasons when people let their yards or whatever fall into disrepair, And so she wrote that. Well, the next day, a lawn truck showed up, and the men got out, took care of the entire lawn. Volunteers came into the house, worked inside and outside the house. Some went to the grocery store and bought groceries. Some fixed food. And here on, through media, a bad letter was posted and brought a community together. But how much more should a community be brought together by the Scripture, which tells us how we ought to treat other people? We ought to be kind, tender-hearted, and gracious to them. David R. Hamilton was a PhD and a chemist, and his research was in the area of cancer and cardiac drugs, but he left those, and I want you to notice on your sheet, I think I put it there on your sheet, he left to study the health benefits of kindness and happiness. He says, performing a kind act releases oxytocin, the same brain chemical that surges when you hold a little baby or a little puppy or a cat, and that will temporarily lower your blood pressure. Kindness is literally good for your heart, says Hamilton. Now, of course, that's not why we should be kind, but that is a little bit of a nice benefit to being kind to other people. There's a Chicago man who performs, and I wrote these all out for you because I thought you might want to see them, an act of kindness every day and blogs about it so his daughter will see it. He wants to instill in her doing random acts of kindness. There's a woman who rings strangers' doorbells and gives them sunflowers or leaves them on the porch. And on the first day of school, the same woman with sidewalk chalk writes, "Don't be shy, we're all new friends." What an encouragement to little children coming to school, and it's a new situation, new friends, new year. And I liked this one especially, and knew you would. There's a coffee shop in South Carolina where ordinary customers regularly hand over $100 bills with instructions that the cash be used to pay for other customers' coffee until the money runs out. I guess in that situation you need to also pray that the person you hand it to is honest and will use it for that. Aviator Amelia Earhart said, "A single act of kindness throws out roots in all directions, and the roots spring up and make new trees." Robert Murray McShane was a Scottish pastor in the 1800s. There's a church named in Scotland somewhere for him. He says the Christian is a person who makes it easy for others to believe in God. Now, when I just read that one quote to Lou, because I love that quote, and he says, "Or not." And I said, "Lou, that's not..." But it's true. The more I got to thinking about it, it is true. The Christian is a person who makes it easy for others to believe in God, but their actions or lack of action or meanness or gossiping tongues, whatever it is, can also affect people the other way. John 13:14, "If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet." David Jeremiah tells of some women who were on a tour in the Holy Land, and they wore sandals. And all day long they went over the hills and down the streets and everywhere else. And their feet were filthy, and they could not wait to get back to the hotel to take their sandals off and wash their feet. And the lady said, "We had a new appreciation of the custom in the Holy Land of washing other people's feet." And Jesus, who washed his disciples' feet. There was a 6-year-old boy named Eric in a town in Canada who was watching a YouTube video that showed police officers performing acts of kindness. He was inspired by that. Now, this is a 6-year-old boy, okay, a first grader usually when they're 6. And he determined his goal for the year was to do 100 acts of kindness. And he started off by giving coffee to the police officers that he would see, and he started passing out flowers to strangers. And as of now, and I think this was in December magazine, he performed 41 kind acts. Now his goal was 100, so he's got 59 left. But this is what he said: when those 59 are done, I'm going to do 200 next year. Now, we can see in the news all the time about the children who are putting lemonade stands out and handing out flowers and raising money for a child in their class who can't go on a particular trip, and so they're doing things. Little children often have the kindness just that's innate to them. They don't have to be taught it. Hopefully they won't outgrow it, but sometimes that can happen. Now, how can we follow Christ's example? We've looked at the meaning of kindness and what Jesus did. Just scratch the surface on that. How other people show kindness. All right, now how can we show kindness? And Elizabeth George in the book gave us 4 principles that we need to think about. Love others more than ourselves. Now, if we will do that, then we won't have problems being kind. It's when we think of ourselves more highly than we ought to think, or we think of ourselves more than the other person, that then there's going to be a conflict and a problem. Care for the comfort of others more than our own. We all like to be comfortable, but we need to think of the other person. Consider others more important than ourselves. And her 4th one was to forego quarreling. Nothing is ever gained by quarreling. We spend a lot of energy, a lot of time, get our emotions all involved to quarrel, which really has no good end to it at all. Philippians 2:3, let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let others esteem each other better than themselves. Now, this is the perfect verse for showing kindness. Ever since I was a little girl, I've loved the passage of the Good Samaritan. I used to see flannel graph stories. Some of you young people don't know what flannel graph stories are, probably. But we were brought up on flannel graph stories. And Lou's mother, in their little town and in their little church, always, she made the background. She got paints and colors and all. And she was just fascinating. And we always got her, when we went up to visit, to sit at the kitchen table and show our children, tell them the flannel graph stories that she had. Remember, the Samaritans didn't really have anything to do with the Jews, all right? So this man from Jerusalem was on his way to Jericho, and he fell among thieves. And the thieves grabbed him, beat him up, took his clothes, and left him half dead there on the side of the road. And then look what happened. And you know this story. The priest came by that way. And when he saw him, he passed on the other side. He didn't even walk over to see how he was. He just went by on the other side. And likewise a Levite, when he was at the place, came and looked at him. So he did come and look at him, but then he passed by on the other side. But a certain Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was. And when he saw him, he had compassion on him, and went to him and bound up his wounds, and pouring in oil and wine, and set him on his own beast, which meant he had to walk, however far it was, to the inn. He brought him to an inn and took care of him there. And on the morrow, when he departed, he took out 2 pence and gave them to the host, and said unto him, take care of him, And whatsoever thou spendest more than this, when I come again I'll repay thee. Which now of these three thinkest thou was neighbor unto him that fell among the thieves? And the lawyer who had asked the question in the first place, who is your neighbor, said, he that showed mercy on him. Then Jesus said unto him, go thou and do likewise. We can show compassion as the Good Samaritan did. We can help people. We can bind up their wounds, the wounds inside that they are hurting with, as well as if somebody got hurt. He was compassionate when he fed the hungry people who had listened to him for hours. The disciples said, let them go away, let them get their own food. And I liked one particular idea I read, that just have the food there. You don't have to make it go around. You just bring what you have. Jesus will take care of the rest. He commanded us to be compassionate in 1 John 3:17. But whosoever has the world's good and sees his brother in needs and shuts up his heart from him, how does the love of God abide in him? If we have the means to help somebody financially who is struggling, suffering, we need to do that. Jesus reminded us how to be kind and courteous in 1 Peter 3:8. Finally, all of you be of one mind, having compassion for one another. Love as brothers, be tender-hearted, be courteous. That word kind and tender-hearted goes throughout almost everything we've read today. Another way besides showing compassion, we can listen. People need to just talk. I had a student once who had a very terrible breakup. She was engaged to be married within a few months. Her mother wasn't there. I think her mother-in-law had come and didn't like her and made the boy ask for the ring back. It was not the best situation for a young lady to be, so she would come in my office and she would just pour her heart out. And I would try to talk with her and then pray with her. So she came in so much, she got to where she'd just go over to my Kleenex box and take the Kleenex, because she knew she'd start crying when we talked about it. But she just needed somebody to hear her. She couldn't pour her heart out to her roommates. And so it's very important that we listen to people. Matthew 7:12, therefore all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. And again repeated in Luke 6:31, and as ye would that men should do to you, do ye also to them likewise. And this world would be a better place if we did that. The way we want to be treated, we would treat others the same way. And it's important to really listen when people are pouring their hearts out to you, or if they're just chatting. It shows them we love them and that we care about them. It gives them the attention they need. Sometimes they just need attention. They just need you to look them in the eye. I always liked the play by Thornton Wilder, Our Town. And when the girl chooses to go back on her 12th birthday, she keeps saying, Mama, just look at me 1 minute as if you really saw me. And I think sometimes we get so busy doing other things, and we do listen, but we're not giving eye focus. We're not looking right in their eyes while they're telling us whatever it is. If we do listen well, we can give them better advice and understanding, and we can encourage. I've mentioned encouragement 3 different times in 3 different lessons, and it's very important that we speak a kind word, we write a kind note, and I gave you a little example there. There was a kind teacher in an orphanage in Lynchburg, Virginia. When Guy Ellens and my father was a little boy, they made fun of him, they ridiculed him, this teacher did, on how he spelled stomach. He spelled it with a K instead of an H. It should be spelled with a K. That's how you pronounce it. But anyway, she said, oh, class, listen to how Robert spelled stomach. S-T-O-M-A-C-K. Stomac, stomac, stomac. And when he would tell us that, he wasn't bitter about it, but he'd get his voice way up there, apparently, how the lady had hers. It had made a deep impression. So he did something wrong. He didn't open his books for the next 3 years. And he sat in that class with that lady, and flunked it 3 years in a row. But then they got a new teacher in there who was very kind and sweet. And she called him in the first day and said, "Now, Robert, they tell me that you won't study. Now, I believe you're smart, and I'm going to help you this year, and you are going to catch up." And so she was just very kind to him. From then on, he got straight A's all the way through elementary and then through high school. And it was because of this lady's sweet spirit and kindness, and the other woman's mean spirit. Now, that may have been the only time that woman was ever mean, but it made an impression on him. If you're going to encourage someone, you give them hope or confidence. If you're going to be kind to someone, you are sympathetic, friendly, and gentle. And if you're going to praise someone, you are going to commend the worth of. You're going to express approval, admiration of. And of course, Scripture teaches us so much about encouragement and praise. We don't know how much a kind note will mean to someone. And when they write you back and say, "Oh, what a ministry of love your note was to me," and you're going, you're trying to think, what did I say? What was the note about? And the same way we feel when we get a note of encouragement from someone. Isaiah 50:41, "The Lord hath given me the tongue of the learned, that I should know how to speak a word in season to him who is weary." We need to encourage them to rejoice. I've gone through a lot of different ways there. "A soft answer turneth away wrath," Proverbs 15:1 says, "but grievous words stir up anger." Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who wrote Rime of the Ancient Mariner, "Water, water everywhere and not a drop to drink," said, "Advice is like snow. The softer it falls, the longer it dwells upon and the deeper it sinks into the mind." When somebody's just yelling and yelling and yelling at someone, even if the person deserves to be rebuked, it's just they can't think. But let it fall softly into it. "Look pleasant and smile." We're skipping along now. "Takes 14 muscles to smile and 72 muscles to frown." That has been proven. So why would we want to get all those extra wrinkles with a frown when we could be smiling? And it is contagious. So pass it on. And sound pleasant. And then we can provide, you all have provided so many meals to the sick, to those who have lost loved ones. Dr. Walter Fremont at Bob Jones taught me several different subjects, but he always talked about the floating anonymous $10 bill and sometimes the $20 bill if you had it. And if you have more, do it. But he said, if you know somebody's struggling financially, just put a bill in an envelope, put the person's name, and send it to the person, and it'll make a big difference. We can provide thoughtful gifts, and I've got a lot of those written down for you that we can do. But baking bread or cookies and delivering the food to a nearby fire station, a group home, or police headquarters, fire station, I've already got that, or neighbors, that'll make a big difference. And at Christmas time, Christy, when they lived in Malden, now they're way out in the middle of nowhere, but when they lived in Malden, they made cookies at Christmas time, and they'd put tracts on them. And they'd go, and of course the little boys were so cute, and she'd let them go up to the door and knock on the door and hand the tract and the cookies to the people who were there. And then we can pray is the last thing we need to do. Now, I'm not putting it last because it's least important. But besides just praying for the people, we need to put feet to our prayers, and we need to do the action as well. We need to pray specifically for the needs of others. Dr. Grace Haight, I was named for Dr. Haight, my middle name is Grace, and she had these maps, and they were worn out, but she had cut up a map of the world, and put them on different cardboard pieces. And she circled where every missionary she knew was. And then she put a line out to the edge, and she put the people's name and prayed specifically. And then if there was a place where she didn't know somebody, she said, "Now, Lord, I don't know anybody who lives there, but you do. And if they have some needs, I'm going to ask you to please take care of them." I had those maps, and they asked for them in the library, and Nobody's seen them for about 3 years. I keep asking, but so far they're not showing up. But the edges are all frayed from all of her many hours of praying. Pray thankfully. Pray for opportunity to reach others with your kindness. And pray for sensitivity. Colossians 4:4 says that I may make it manifest as I ought to speak. Remember, some people are really hurting. I said that earlier. Somebody sitting right next to you this morning may be really hurting, may have some really bad news or things that they're waiting to hear an answer on. And just telling them we're praying for them brings a lot of comfort. Those words, I'm praying for you, but then be sure you do pray for them. Just don't say the words and then not pray for them. So today we've talked about the meaning of kindness, how Jesus exemplified kindness, how other people exemplify kindness, and how we can exemplify kindness and show God's love and compassion. Elizabeth George, in our book, said the highest compliment a Christian woman can receive is to be described as too nice. If people say that of you or me, we can know we're truly exhibiting the Spirit's fruit of kindness. Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for your love. We thank you for the fruit of the Spirit we're studying about. We ask that it would really change our lives, make us to be more thoughtful of others, better Christian ladies. Help us to show people kindness. Help us to plan the kindness if we need to. And we know with some people it's just they're kind. But we ask that you would help us to all grow in the Spirit, and we would manifest the Spirit and the fruit that we have been studying about. Be with us as we go our separate ways for Jesus' sake. Amen.